The notice arrived taped to the gate just after sunrise. It was bright red, stamped with legal language, and impossible to ignore. Mark Bennett stood in the dusty driveway of his late father's ranch, staring at the paper as if it had been written in another language. According to the Homeowners Association, the land he had inherited no longer belonged to him. He read the words again, slower this time. The HOA claimed the ranch violated zoning rules, and failure to comply meant immediate seizure. Mark felt a cold weight settle in his chest. His father had spent 40 years building this place board by board, fence by fence. Losing it felt like losing him all over again. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as Mark pulled the notice down. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked relieved. Then he saw her, standing across the road, arms folded, was Linda Crowley, the HOA president. Her posture was rigid, her expression unreadable. When their eyes met, she offered a thin smile that never reached her eyes. Mark folded the paper slowly. He didn't know it yet, but that single notice was the beginning of a battle that would shake the entire neighborhood, and before it was over, one of them would leave the courtroom speechless. Mark had returned to the ranch only 3 weeks earlier, still grieving and unsure how to live without the steady guidance of his father. The property was more than land, it was childhood memories, summer storms on the porch, and the smell of cedar drifting through open windows. The HOA had never bothered his father, but now the letters kept coming, violation warnings. Compliance demands. Penalties. Each envelope carried Linda Crowley's signature. At first Mark assumed it was a misunderstanding. He attended a board meeting, hoping for clarity. Instead, he found cold stares and polite smiles hiding impatience. Linda spoke in measured tones, explaining that the ranch structures did not meet updated aesthetic guidelines. She suggested modernization, removal of fencing, and conversion of the barn into a community-friendly space. Mark felt the room tighten around him. "This ranch isn't a decoration," he said quietly. "It's my father's legacy." Linda's smile returned. "It's also within HOA jurisdiction." The vote to enforce compliance passed unanimously. Walking out into the night, Mark realized this wasn't about paint colors or fencing. It was about control, and he had the sinking feeling the HOA wasn't finished with him yet. The fines began the following week. At first they were small administrative penalties, late fees, inspection charges. But they multiplied quickly, stacking into numbers that made Mark's hands tremble. When he called the HOA office, he was routed through polite voices and endless hold music. When he emailed, he received automated responses quoting policy clauses. Meanwhile, neighbors began avoiding eye contact. One afternoon, an elderly man named Walter stopped at the fence line. He removed his hat and spoke softly. "Your father kept this place alive," he said. Some folks never liked that. Before Mark could ask what he meant, Walter walked away. That evening, Mark reviewed old property documents in the farmhouse study. Buried among deeds and tax records, he found something unexpected: a handwritten agreement signed decades earlier between his father and the original developer. It granted permanent agricultural use exemptions. Mark stared at the signature line. The developer's name was still etched on the HOA welcome sign at the neighborhood entrance. For the first time since the notices began, hope flickered. But when he mentioned the document to the HOA the next morning, Linda's expression hardened. "That exemption," she said coolly, "is no longer valid." Her answer came too quickly, and Mark realized the fight ahead would not be simple. Within days, the HOA escalated their actions. A formal demand letter arrived, declaring the ranch structures non-compliant and subject to legal enforcement. It warned that continued resistance could result in property reassignment under community preservation statutes. Mark read the sentence 3 times. Property reassignment. It sounded like a polite way to say confiscation. He drove to the county records office, determined to verify every document himself. The clerk retrieved archived filings that confirmed the agricultural exemption had never been revoked. "Everything here looks intact," she told him. Mark felt a surge of relief, followed quickly by anger. Why would the HOA insist otherwise? That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, he noticed a contractor measuring sections of fencing along his property line. When confronted, the man hesitated before admitting he had been hired to prepare removal estimates by the HOA. Mark watched the truck disappear down the road, dust swirling behind it. This was no clerical error. Someone wanted the ranch gone, and he was beginning to understand just how far they were willing to go. The lawsuit arrived on a Monday morning, filed by the HOA. It claimed Mark's refusal to comply had reduced neighborhood property values and violated community standards. The filing requested judicial authorization to transfer the land into HOA stewardship, neighbors whispered as the news spread. Some avoided him entirely. Others offered quiet encouragement but refused to get involved. Mark hired an attorney using the last of his savings. Together they reviewed the exemption agreement, zoning history, and the HOA's enforcement timeline. Patterns emerged: selective enforcement, policy reinterpretations, procedural shortcuts. During preparation, Mark discovered something even more startling. The HOA had recently approved architectural plans for a luxury clubhouse expansion, positioned exactly where his ranch stood. The realization hit him like a sudden storm. This wasn't about compliance, it was about expansion, and the ranch was in the way. As the court date approached, Mark stood at the fence his father built decades earlier, running his hand along the weathered wood. He wasn't just defending land, he was defending memory, history, and the promise his father made to protect it. What he didn't know was that the courtroom would reveal far more than property lines. The courtroom felt colder than Mark expected. Linda Crowley sat confidently at the HOA table, flanked by attorneys and neatly stacked documents. She appeared composed, certain, prepared. When proceedings began, the HOA argued that community standards must evolve and that Mark's ranch represented an outdated land use incompatible with neighborhood development. Their presentation was polished and persuasive. Then Mark's attorney stood. She presented the original exemption agreement, county confirmations, and zoning continuity records. She highlighted the HOA's selective enforcement and revealed the clubhouse expansion proposal aligned with the ranch's footprint. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Linda's expression tightened for the first time, but the most powerful moment came when Mark was asked to speak. He didn't raise his voice. He simply described his father building the ranch by hand, neighbors gathering there during storms, and the promise that the land would remain a place of shelter and tradition. Silence filled the room. The judge reviewed the documents carefully before calling a recess. As Mark stepped into the hallway, uncertainty pressed in from every direction. Inside that courtroom, the future of the ranch and the truth behind the HOA's actions waited to be decided. When court reconvened, the room seemed to hold its breath. The judge spoke slowly, outlining the evidence: the valid agricultural exemption, the HOA's failure to lawfully revoke it, and the improper attempt to enforce selective compliance measures. He then addressed the expansion proposal, using HOA authority to pressure a homeowner into relinquishing protected property. He ruled, violated both statutory protections and fiduciary responsibility. Linda Crowley's confident posture faltered. The ruling was clear. The ranch would remain Mark Bennett's property. All fines were dismissed, legal costs were awarded to Mark, and the HOA was ordered to halt expansion plans affecting protected land. For a moment, Linda said nothing. Her silence spoke louder than any argument she had made. Outside the courthouse, neighbors gathered quietly. Some offered apologies. Others simply nodded with newfound respect. Mark returned to the ranch at sunset. The wind moved softly through the fields, and for the first time since his father's passing, the place felt steady again. The battle had never been just about land, it had been about standing firm when memory, truth, and home were placed at risk, and that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you loved the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.